Testing. Testing. 1 second, guys. I think I got some stream issues. Why is it going through this? Test, test. Alright, so automatically have an issue today. For some reason, my stream key has been intercepted by another stream I tried to do. Which is no bueno, but I'm going to continue anyways. I will give people a couple of seconds to trickle in. This is not the room that everybody was hoping I'd be on, but just testing a couple of things here. Oh, well, at least the cross stream over to Facebook worked. So I'm going to just continue as normal. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. This is going to be part 2 of the children of Zeus, the promiscuity of Zeus. We're going to be decoding quite a bit of that. This decoding isn't really the word, but that is the case. I'm going to throw some super chat goals up here real quick. Just hang with me, let people trickle in, guys. I do have a song for you today. All right, guys. So this is a two-parter. If you are joining us from Facebook, this is a cross stream, so I'm streaming to Facebook and to YouTube. Just testing out to see how well this works. Already, I found out I have a little issue with the streaming key. The video I set up earlier this week, I guess I plugged in the wrong stream key or whatever. But this is a two-parter. If you want, go back and watch the first one on YouTube. But this is the second part, and in the first iteration of this, we began by talking through the Orphic rhapsodic theogonies about Zeus and his many, many affairs with the Titanuses and the Olympians and all of the different progeny that Zeus brings forth. Now, we're not looking at this from Hesiod's point of view. We are looking at this from the Orphic view, from the rhapsodic theogonies, which are a collection of fragments that we have from various writers. So we do not have this as an extant text. It's not something that we have available. It has been compiled from various sources, Proclus, Damascus, a lot of Neoplatonists and others, including some of the early church writers. So what we have here is an amalgamation of these things and our best approximation of what they were probably talking about. With that being said, in the first video, I covered a lot of ground, and what we're seeing here in this diagram is what we covered. One of the first things Zeus does when he comes into creating the world is he mates with Fate, and then he continues to mate with Themis and bring about justice, good order, and peace, as well as some of the charities, the graces. He then mates with himself, it seems, with Dione, which is in many ways just a female version, which is probably why there's not an actual consummation. He can't actually get there, so his seed falls into the ocean itself, and then that is what generates the vivific principle of Aphrodite. So from there, he mates with Hera, and then brings about Hephaestus, the craftsman, Ares, the more male vivific principle, Hebe and Iliotheia as guardians of liminal spaces. And so what we're getting at is, so far, what Zeus has created are a few orders of form. And what I've kind of tabulated, and let me see if I can find it here in the presentation. Yeah, right here. In the first order, which we've already covered, I'm just kind of backtracking before we get into the meat of the rest of what Zeus produces, um, is fate. And, of course, also the first iteration of wisdom when he swallows Metis. Um, now, what's funny is in Hesiod, Metis is um, referred to as a Titaness, this cunning uh, counterpart to Zeus. But of course, in the Orphic, there is a slightly different take, and Metis is a name of Phanes. And so we see this swallowing of Phanes gives him a sense of cunning, a sense of wisdom through that act of swallowing. So it's slightly different from Hesiod and from Orpheus. Now, beyond that first order, we have the second order of the cosmic regulatory principles: justice, good order, and peace. Those were what he created out of his union with Themis, which is, of course, divine cosmic order of a grander scale. We later got into, and this is again, go back to this first video of this to watch, and the audio was, I'm sorry, terrible on that one, but I think I have got it fixed here. I tested it before the show. If it doesn't sound good, please let me know so that I can stop and try and fix it. But in that third order, what we see grouped is Aphrodite as this more feminine, enlivening principle, and then his progeny from Hera seem to be, in many ways, the form or the crafting elements of the cosmos. Hephaestus being the primary here. There's a very male order coming out of the Zeus-Hera union, but then it's kind of counterbalanced with this, the younger daughters of Hebe and Iliotheia. And so those are what kind of show up in the Orphic Rhapsodies as a third order, or the material manifestation principle. And we talked about some of these soteriological principles. I'm not going to go over them again today. I want to get into this fourth order of being. And so the Orphic Rhapsodies, they continue on, and he continues to mate. After the creation of Hephaestus and Ares and Hebe and Iliotheia, he mates with Leto, another Titaness. And if we know anything about Hera and how Zeus is typically with his other affairs, there are some issues that come about from this mythically. But the Orphics don't really talk about it much. They just say, okay, now Zeus continues his work. He continued to father glorious children, manly Artemis and her brother Apollon, the shining one, or Phoebus, for which the Titan Leto is called the mother of the twins. Now, this is a really interesting instance because the twins in themselves, they're the only set of like twins. The sisters born from Themis are not described as triplets, so potentially not necessarily born at the same time. So they're not on equal ground. If that makes sense. What I'm getting at is that these are a polar set of principles that have to stay kind of intrinsically linked as twins would. And I think that's the reason that they are considered twins, is that they have to exist. One of them has to exist for the other to exist. When it comes to some of the others, Hephaestus, Ares, Hebe, Iliotheia, or even Dike, Eunomia, and all those, they don't necessarily have to exist together the same way that Artemis and Apollo seem intrinsically linked. Now, what's interesting in the Orphic text is that Artemis is born first. She's born first, and I think that has to do with some linking and some crossover between her and Iliotheia, who is again the goddess of childbirth, of that liminal space. Artemis also has some epithets that are very reminiscent of that. And so it's almost like orders of existence being birthed. So out of that order, the final part of that order, Iliotheia, as listed in the Orphic Rhapsodic Theogonies, the next being born is Artemis. So it's like on the other side of things, on the other side of that liminal boundary is Artemis. described as manly. Well, she embodies the principle of boundaries, transitions, selective manifestation, and the guardian of thresholds, but like on this side of things, if you will. One of the things I've talked about many, many times in writing and in videos is that the Orphics tend to see these beings as different names across different orders of reality. And what I mean by that, the closest thing I can kind of estimate is like Russian nesting dolls. You open one up and there's another one inside, and you open one up and there's another one inside, and it just kind of keeps going. And so Artemis governs the liminal space on this side of that divide. It's like opening up Iliathea, then you have Artemis. And so there's a lot of what Artemis does govern mythically, right? She is this kind of wild huntress, but she's also, being of that woodland area. You see this kind of liminal aspect within most of her realm and what she guards. She's also lunar, and much of the moon governs so much of the feminine principle. The moon governs so much of the birthing principle. We have 9 moons. You don't have a full solar year that is governed within the process of birth. It is governed by the moon. And so I think that's an interesting thing. For birth to occur, the moon kind of comes first, in a sense, in this Orphic cosmogony. And so Artemis comes first. She determines what may pass between these different levels of reality. So she's kind of like a guardian of those in-between spaces. Whereas her brother Apollo, or Apollon, the shining one, the sun, right, Phoebus, he is an illuminative intelligence in their cosmogony. He brings clarity. He brings order. He is another version of Helios, but on a different order, right? So we've talked about Helios before when I was doing a video on the Titanic cosmogony. And Apollo sort of represents, at least in many cases orphically, the next iteration, if you will, of Helios. And it gets kind of wild when it comes to how the Neoplatonists see these things. It's like we have instances of Zeus and Kronos being the same being, but also looking back in at each other through different layers of the cosmos. I think you can see the same thing happening here with Apollo and Helios. These things kind of happen on like a holographic level. They just kind of psychedelically expands, and you see different names as different representations of that same principle on a new order of being. So as the slayer of Python, which is kind of interesting, I might do a video on that at some point, he subdues the kind of chthonic, the previous primordial forces. Now, if we remember, Python is the kind of serpent of Gaia. It is a primordial force, and Apollo slaying Python creates all kinds of mythical fun between Gaia and the Olympians, but it also signals that there is a new level of order coming into being, and that is really what we're getting at here with Zeus, his recreation of the cosmos, the Olympian principle as well. And so this mediational dyad between these two creates a necessary tension or for consciousness. So if Artemis is our katabatic descent through birth into this world, Apollo represents the opposite. Apollo is the guiding principle, the harmonic cosmic order principle that we have to follow morally in the case of the Orphics and in the case of much of, I think, Greek religion, to ascend, to come back out. So just as Artemis is a katabasis, Apollo is the anagogue. He is the ascent. So this fragment notes that Apollo sits at his father's side and proclaims his will. It's very reminiscent there, isn't it, of Christ sitting at the side of the Father. Now, Apollo is in many ways the logos for the Neoplatonists. But for the Orphics, it's a little bit different. We've got Dionysus, we've got Apollo. Are they the same guy? In many cases, yes, they're kind of like different sides of the same coin. Plutarch says their scene is the same, and many of the other authors in that period also say the same. So this is his role. He is an interpreter and deployer, if you will, of the divine intelligence of Zeus into the lower realm, while Artemis and her dogs, who seek beautiful prey, symbolize her discernment in determining which potentials deserve manifestation. So imagine, if you will, everything in the swirling cosmos that's trying to come into being. Artemis is the determiner, she who basically allows something to come into being. For the Orphic initiate, though, this dyad represents the twin faculties of discrimination and illumination. Artemis determines, Apollo illuminates its nature, right? So Artemis identifies it, brings it into the world, but only once it has been born into the world can you truly understand what it is. Its potential is essentially discovered by Apollo, by Apollo's light. And together they are kind of like the necessary tension to create this new cosmos. So that's why they come right after all of the form that is presented by Aphrodite and Hephaestus. These are the governing mechanisms. These are the levers, if you will, that will govern the cosmic form. Excuse me. So again, we'll talk a little bit more about Artemis. I've kind of touched on this already, but she integrates this masculine delimiting power with the female generative potential. And as the great huntress, she seeks beautiful prey to receive her arrows. And I think this is a metaphor for selective function in determining which potential beings deserve to come into actualization. So she's kind of a determiner of whether or not you get born. This idea of seeks beautiful prey to receive her arrows also feels like a call back to Eros, to Cupid and the bow. Like, if you think about it, you get struck by that bow, you fall into love with someone, you produce a child. There's some connections there, and it may be a reach, but beautiful prey to receive her arrows. That's something to think on. Nothing in the Orphic corpus is on accident. And everything has multiple layers of meaning. So it's interesting to take a look at some of these pieces as they come out and say, what were they really thinking about when they were talking about Artemis? Like I said, she operates at the thresholds between realms, liminal spaces, so transitions between state of being, birth, death. Artemis is kind of there. More so birth. Death is... we're going to see more of the other side of things. A more feminine principle would be Persephone in this case, Orphically. But as a huntress, she's also kind of involved in the death process. She interfaces between these ontological level layers, so different orders of being. She is the selective permeability, if you will. Her assistance to women in childbirth is called to in the Orphic hymns. And again, harkens back to Iliatheia. For the Orphic initiate, though, she is discrimination, determination, and an understanding of consciousness and how it operates at different layers of reality. And there she is, the huntress herself, Diana, Artemis. Basically, don't mess with her. That was the gist of most of the myths. So Apollo, the shining one, is noetic light in and of itself. It's the kind of light of the sun that we see. It reveals the cosmic order. Without the sun, we can't see how everything puts itself together. We're wandering around in the dark. He makes things comprehensible through our ability to see. Our fragments describe him as the slayer of Python, but also the great liberator. Again, that's another callback to a lot of connections between the Logos, Christ, and Apollo. He is the great liberator. His brother, or his other side, Dionysus, the great loosener. So he has twin functions. not only does he slay the chaos that was the previous world, he is the liberator of the soul and the essentially the redeemer. And that being said, again, he said he sat at the side of his father. One of the interesting things about him, though, beyond those two functions, is his uniting of the two streams of oracular ability. So one comes from Zeus. So Zeus inherits his oracular ability from essentially the swallowing of the cosmos, right? Swallowing of Phanes and everything in it gives him oracular ability. But through Themis and Phoebe and Gaia and Rhea and Gaia and all these primordials before him from the feminine side, since Artemis and Apollo are parented by Leto, there is a feminine oracular ability that he also inherits. So this also represents his capacity to synthesize transcendent truth from a male and a female perspective. So that's why Apollo plays such a crucial role, oracularly speaking, at the Temple of Delphi, is that he gets it from both sides of his parentage. He gets the Orphic voice, if you will. He gets that oracular ability from both sides. It says, as he plays the mystic guitar, which spins our souls to freedom, which is really interesting, this Orphic fragment associated with Apollo and his birth. It is a harmonizing principle. His music brings order and beauty out of the chaos and makes it into simplicity, something like the music of the spheres that Pythagoras talks about. So his music is a mathematical or a harmonic pattern that underlies the cosmic structure. Yes, cryptic cocktails, yeah. First one on the dance floor, absolutely. Music plays a huge part in this entire thing, especially for the Orphics. And so for the initiate, the Apollo represents the illuminative aspect of consciousness that perceives the underlying order amidst the chaos. By aligning with this principle, if you're an Orphic, you develop a clarity of perception. You kind of begin to see. Without light, you can't see, and that's why I think you get this idea of Apollo as he who sees, or can see into the future, or can provide oracular knowledge of things. Is that sacred light? There he is, the man himself. Is it laggy, Mario? It might be because I'm trying a double stream today. I'm trying to stream to Facebook as well. So I will take note of that. Just a sec. Yeah, interesting. Well, it might just be that. It might be that dual streaming is not in my bag. But I'm gonna continue. Is the sound okay though, Mario? You let me know. Cool. Thanks. So, on the same level as this mediational dyad, on the same level as Apollo and Artemis, Zeus again mates. With cave-dwelling Maia, he produces cheerful and clever Hermes, the luck-bringing messenger of the deathless gods, who is cherished for his great love of mankind. Yes, blame the technology. It can't handle the Orphica. That's what it is. It just can't handle the Orphic awesomeness of our streams. There's too much information coming through in the bandwidth. So through Maia, he has Hermes. What's interesting here, again, Maia is considered a separate entity if you are just following Hesiod. But Maia is also one of the Orphic names for Nyx. So here we have a potential of Zeus mating with Night, with Nyx herself, and from that union we get Hermes. This is a union of celestial and chthonic realms. So if Maia is the symbol of primal wisdom, beyond mere Pleiad in the Orphic context, Maia embodies an ancient knowing, as evidenced by Zeus calling Night herself within the Orphic Rhapsodies. So we go back to the cave. It's always with the cave with the Orphics, and many of the Greeks. This idea of caves is a very common thing in the Mediterranean in general, but the attribute of cave dwelling signals that Maia's connection to the chthonic realm, to the dead, or to the earth itself, is a primordial space where transformation occurs. So it also points to a generative mystery. The conjunction of birth and of mediating intelligence. And what I mean by mediating intelligence is what we're going to get out of Hermes. Hermes mediates between realms. He is the messenger. He is the one who can travel up and down. So few of the stars do we see dip below the horizon, astrologically speaking, and then come back. For those in antiquity, one of the planets going below the horizon was seen as going into the underworld itself. And so here we see that first mediating principle of Hermes. And so this ability, I think, for Hermes comes from the parentage that we have here, but from Night and from Zeus. So he gets the power from both sides. But it exemplifies how this Zeus post Phanes needs to re-engage with Nyx again in some way to have a being capable of going up and down in between, say, Olympus and the underworld and also the world itself. One of the things in both Orphic and Neoplatonic ideology, or just their cosmology in general, is the gods have a hard time coming into the material realm. In fact, with some of the Neoplatonists are like, no, the gods, they stay permanently in eternity. The Orphics take kind of a different kind of point with this. So much of their theology is around salvation, is around Zeus becoming a man, coming in and redeeming us through the body and being of Dionysus. So there's obviously some disagreement there. But in this case, for Zeus to do so, there has to be some sort of intermediating principle, and that is what Hermes is. So for the Orphic initiate, what we can kind of deduce from this is that this divine partnership represents a necessary marriage between higher consciousness and the embodied wisdom of the earth. So teaching that even these highest principles must engage with the depths of the earth to manifest their creative potential. So we're setting up the groundwork for the dragon fires of Akatosh, keeping those Daedra out. Yeah, so, something to that effect, which is funny because I've just recently started replaying Oblivion, which has been a little bit of a fun in my off time. But understanding this union, we can start to recognize how divine communication needed this intermediary to bridge these ontological areas of being, like these realms that are separated by what seems like potentially hard lines. And we've seen that in the previous iterations of the cosmos. You have different orders of beings that protect one layer of reality from another. And Hermes is the great bypasser of those said ontological realms. He can go through any which one of them. He can travel through all of them. So he's incredibly important. What I think is funny is for everyone else to come into being, we have to go through this Apollonian gate and this Artemisian gate to come in and go out. We have a very specific path. But at the same time, right alongside that, Hermes he's got all the gates. He's got all the keys. He can go wherever he wants, which is another case of the Logos, which is, I think, where we get some more of the Christ theology. His great love of mankind. He's a lover of mankind. And he holds the keys to all realms, including the keys of hell, including the keys of heaven. That is like the one of the major points made in early Christendom, is that Christ holds the keys. Well, where did they get that idea? Well, turns out the Greeks were already playing with it. It was just in many different forms, and what seems to have happened is it was crystallized into one. So here we have Zeus with Maia. A little bit more about Hermes, though. He carries divine intent across these ontological boundaries. So if Apollo is the right hand, the dictator, Hermes carries the messages from him. If Apollo's getting the messages from Pops, then Hermes deploys them into the worlds below, whether that is in the underworld or in the mortal realm. And he ensures that that cosmic will remains unified through all those levels of existence. So one of his names is He of Varied Counsel, which is an interpretive intelligence. So if Apollo is illuminative and he just shows, Hermes helps us interpret what those things mean. So he is that mechanism of our own human understanding, hence how we get Hermetism, how we get Hermes, Thoth. This is the guy here. He is the one who's helping us figure out what these symbols mean. The ontological mediation we kind of touched on. He goes between Olympian, terrestrial, and chthonic realms, and he represents that communication across those layers of reality. He's the love of mankind. He is the cosmic principle that higher intelligence naturally extends itself towards the lower orders of beings. That is, it wants to participate in what we are doing. It cares. It wants to. And that goes back to what we were talking about before, this idea of Zeus not caring or being a conqueror or a philanderer. There is a deep desire for the divine, or from the divine, for us to succeed, for us to live in harmony, for us to live in love. Excuse me. Hermes also exemplifies how divine wisdom can become accessible and operative within our lives, within the cosmos, through our own attempts, through our own hopes and dreams. And so he is that faculty of interpretive intelligence that helps us, again, if you're an Orphic initiate, cosmic symbols, sacred language, it's all governed by Hermes. There's the man with his funny hat. His hat cracks me up. It's like, wow, what a fashion choice. Maybe we should all start wearing some Hermes hats. But before we get too far into the rest of the children, so far we've come across some of the basics that we know of from the Olympic 12. Hephaestus, Ares, Aphrodite, Apollo, Artemis, and Hermes. One of the things that kind of gets glossed over is that initial swallowing of Metis and then the birth of Athena. It says in the Orphic corpus, and from his head Zeus produced happy Athena, a glory to behold, all gleaming in bronze and bearing arms, for she is adorned with shining armor at her birth. Now, in this Orphic cosmology, the swallowing of Metis represents more than just like strange mythic violence. It embodies the essential integration of wisdom into sovereign consciousness. The fragment tells us that Zeus, with his own proper heat, draws up what is left in the underlying moisture, to wit, that very strong and divine spirit which they call Metis. So, I mean, really, that is a heavy, deep metaphor. Like, what does it mean by he draws up what is left in the underlying moisture? There's something within those lines that I have not yet to grok myself. So, but this act of internalization from Zeus as merely powerful, but also too supremely wise, is a massive shift, right? Instead of before, Kronos extremely powerful, not necessarily totally wise. Same thing with Uranos before him. Zeus is doing what those creators before him could not do. The unification of power with wisdom. And that wisdom has to come from an opposite or balanced perspective, which is where we get this kind of feminine Athena. She is not only a counterbalance to that masculine principle, but she is the, how do I say it, the inverse cross-fertilization of that wisdom, and like the amalgamation of it, if you will. She is wisdom in and of itself for the Orphics, for the Greeks. It is a unification of that power with wisdom. Okay, we already touched on that. Feminine intuitive knowledge with that masculine ordering principle. That is what Uranus was missing. That's what Kronos was missing. That feminine intuitive knowledge. But Athena is that check for Zeus. She is that counterbalance. It is also the transformation of separated intelligence into integrated consciousness. One could say that Athena is the principle of human ordering in general. Everything else, many of the animal kingdom have a lot of the principles of the Olympians that we've seen before. They can see, they have the ability to birth, they have the ability to kind of even craft forms at times with Hephaestus, but there is, a bird makes a nest, those sorts of things. But what makes a human is very Athena. It comes from Athena. She is the weaver. She is the civilizer. She is the one who gives us order through wisdom. Right? It's not just through laws, but through the understanding that these are the way things should or could or need to be. So she is that cosmic governess coming into the material realm. So as we said, it's a step down. It's this divine nesting egg, if you will, of order, culminating in this cosmic internalization that is Athena. Now, Metis, once swallowed, becomes the internal council. It has to come out of him, and it has to be born into what is Athena. And this is the highest form of that noetic integration. And I think it speaks to our own organizing principle. We have wisdom within ourselves, but we don't see it until it is made with our hands. Athena being wisdom, but also action. What do we do with our creative potential? What are the fruits of those creations? When we go and we weave a basket, or when we pick up a spear to defend someone else, what that is showing what our wisdom is externally. And Athena embodies both the internal and external wisdom. So for the Orphic initiate, this divine process represents the internalization of wisdom and the true understanding that has to be fully integrated rather than held as just simply external knowledge. So inversely, when somebody teaches you something, when somebody says, here's a bit of wisdom, yeah, I can see it, I can hear it, I can kind of take it in, but how do I put it into practice within myself? So in between those two realms of external action and internal integration, that's where Athena rests. That's who she is. And there's a wonderful picture of Athena. In fact, that may not be. That may be Metis. So let's talk a little bit more about her. Hail Athena, slayer of the Gorgon, who accomplishes great deeds and realizes the will of the son of Kronos. You are the pure virtue of the goddesses. You exceed them all in command of the loom and the art of spinning. Skillful Cyclopes taught both you and Hephaestus the disciplines necessary to create all the clever works of heaven. O athletic maiden, you are the Empyrean guardian power who shares the dance of the vigilant Curetes and have become their leader. So she is the guardian of that cosmic order in a deeper ontological level. She is the guardian of all that Zeus puts on this earth, and that is why she was so massively and vitally important for the Greeks. If you don't have Athena, you don't have civilization. It just doesn't exist. So she is, if Apollo is Zeus's right hand, she is the left hand, or vice versa. It doesn't, there's no real right or left is better. They are both like extensions of their father. So from his head is more than just a weird parturition. It is the embodiment of the essential manifestation of his perfectly integrated wisdom. She embodies what his perfect wisdom is. So the fragments describe that from his head he produces happy Athena. It's interesting that they say happy, because when you are working in the mode of Athena, you are happy. A glory to behold, all gleaming in bronze and bearing arms. As this pure virtue, she represents wisdom in its most active and protective forms, intelligence fully aligned with cosmic purpose, and her dramatic birth, which of course is with Hephaestus cleaving open the skull of Zeus, is really epic, but it also signifies wisdom manifesting directly from Zeus's head. Divine, so it's like irrefutable. Just because it's showing itself in another form, what they're trying to say is if Athena says it, it's what Zeus wants. There's no going against that. Don't cross Athena because you cross Daddy Zeus, right? Divine intelligence emerging already fully formed and ready for battle, which means that there is some sort of struggle. There is strife that needs to be met with wisdom. So coming into the world, we know that there is struggle. But how do we meet it? Do we meet it with flailing about like Ares? Do we meet it like Athena, who does it with wisdom, understanding that there is a higher purpose? So she's the perfect alignment of thought and action. Wisdom operated with integrity, if you will. And she's the protective function of true intelligence, so she guards the cosmic order. She leads the Choretes, who were the guardians of the cave of Zeus, the guardian of the cave of Kronos, so on and so forth, back in the Orphic Rhapsodies when we were talking about the caves. They guarded baby Zeus. So it reveals her role as organizing the protective forces that maintain the boundaries, right? So the Choretes, they maintain this order from this order. So Olympian from mortal. And she is... where do I want to go with that? She teaches us that true understanding manifests naturally in perfect action. And perfect action is that which is aligned with your divine cosmic order or your own will, right? Wisdom or will governed by wisdom. For the initiate, say, calling on the Orphic hymn of Athena, you're invoking her essence to align your thought and your deed in harmony with the cosmic order. So that's really what we're getting at with Athena. And so we've moved on, right? We've gone from Aphrodite and Hephaestus to a fourth order of being, which is mediational principles. Not only do we have this polar order of Artemis and Apollo, you could see them as a horizontal line, and then you have Hermes coming through. And what you see here automatically is a cross. Geometrically speaking, if Hermes is a vertical and Artemis and Apollo are a horizontal line, you have those things, and at the center of them, you would have Athena. Where Hermes, his communicative mediation, where Artemis and Apollo meet, and right at that center point, that's where we have Athena. She is the center of this kind of logosphere, if you will, or this cross. And that is what governs the fourth order. Where the Rhapsodies go from here is really, really interesting. They move directly into Zeus's coronation and how he approaches this. So at this point, creation is done. By the time you get to Athena, creation is over. Like, he has made it, and now it is time to essentially fill it with all of the governing powers. But before he can do that, he has to take full power. And so it says, Zeus took up the invincible thunderbolt, crafted for him by the one-eyed Cyclopes, and the staff of Phanes, the staff of the Ricopaios, passed down through all the line of the kings. And he now took the saddle upon a comely she-goat, which transported him to his throne in the sky. So what we have here is the integration of dual cosmic authorities. The thunderbolt is the creative power, the lightning flash, the lightning strike, is the creative, destructive power forged by primordial craftsmen, the Cyclopes, and then, of course, the ordering principle of the Staff of Phanes. It's that primordial wisdom transferred through the chain of the cosmic kings. The thunderbolt and the staff. These are the two things that designate the king. It's essentially the weapon and the ordering stick. I have the stick. I'm the one in charge. Something that Kronos and Uranus never had. They didn't have that creative principle. They had generative principle, but creation is different than generation, it seems. And I think that is where the Orphics were kind of evolving some of the previous understandings of their forebears, was that yes, we had these deities before. Yes, we had these generative, fertility-based, or maybe even ancestral or underworld-based deities, but now we have this idea of this creative deity, which is what Zeus is. But it's also, what we're seeing here is an establishment of balanced governing principles. So he goes to two beings to ask questions about how he needs to rule. He's previously gone to Nyx before several times within the Rhapsodies, but he's also going to go to his father, to Kronos. And it says, Nyx bid him to keep the law, to keep justice and piety at his side, and that these three principles will create the foundation for a harmonious and cosmic rule. And so she's telling him, like, if you want to avoid what happened to the previous two rulers, then what you have to do is keep law, justice, and piety at your side in all things. And she said that you need a balancing feminine principle. Uranus kind of disregards what Gaia wants. Kronos disregards what Rhea wants. Zeus can't do that. That's what Nyx is saying. If you really want this, you have to do it the right way. She sets up the original marriage between Gaia and Uranus, and that goes haywire from the start. And the same thing happens with Rhea and Kronos. And so it says, and joined with him in marriage his sister Hera, of equal rank with him. Hera proceeds together with Jupiter, generating all things in conjunction with the Father. One of them is a certain vivific deity, proceeds from it, and which is the fountain of all progression and generation of souls. So if he is the creative principle, the artificer, she is the matrix that all these things come into being through. So without her as that counterbalance, things again go crazy. Ooh, excuse me. But for the Orphic initiate, somebody understanding some of these deeper meanings, this coronation reveals the essential truth that cosmic power has to be balanced between masculine and feminine principles. The Orphics were very much on board with the whole equality idea, that masculine and feminine principles had to be recognized to achieve an ethical life. So if we have Zeus is the demiurgic, or the forming side, Hera is the animator. She is the vivifying side. And true creation can only come about when you have both life-giving energy and the ordering principle and generative potential to merge together. And that is what is known as harmony, or complementary creation. So after this, after Nyx, who says you got to live with order and law and peace, and you've got to share power, or understand that there is a counter to you in Hera, he goes to his father and he says, excuse me, oh, tired. Glorious Daimon, how must I set up this generation and raise up our generation? Glorious Daimon. This cosmic understanding, he goes to the generations that came before him. He goes to Kronos. And it says in some of the fragments behind, or speaking about the Rhapsodies, mighty Kronos grants to the demiurge from on high the principles of his understanding. The Father surrenders to him all the due allotments of the whole creation. And this goes back to some of what the Neoplatonists talk about, where Zeus is looking back at the Father. So if at the outset of everything that Zeus has created, there is still a previous, like, image, if you will, of Kronos and of the previous iterations of the cosmos. And Zeus is capable of looking back at that and understanding what Kronos has to say, or what that divine cosmos, the wisdom is there, and transmitting it for us. And so this him going to it, or going to Kronos, signifies that we need to look, in some cases, to the past, to receive generational wisdom, to understand how to live ethically. Kronos doesn't get, like, thrown into Tartarus necessarily for the Orphics. He exists, or is elevated beyond, like, creation in a way. He bears himself the consummate causes of unifications and divisions. He is the keeper of the bonds of creation, if you will. They're all, the strings are attached to him. When Nyx says to Zeus, gather all of the golden chains of creation and wrap them around everything and take them inside of you, those chains were that of Kronos. He is the delimiter. He is he has the chains of creation. And the Phoenicians, now this is from another fragment, the Phoenicians think of him as the first daimon, oh my god, who was demiurgic, if you will. He's the first being that has that demiurgic ability. Probably something to do with the scythe, and the idea that there was a previous iteration of deities that ruled and had humans under their had a mortal and an immortal world in conjunction before this Zeus remaking of the world, before this redemptive arc that came about through Zeus. But this cosmic necessity is balanced because he goes to both night and to Kronos. So he gets feminine wisdom and masculine wisdom, and he unites them into an integrative wisdom. And that is what new sovereignty requires, is ancestral knowledge from both sides. So for the Orphic initiate, this divine consultation reveals a profound truth about wisdom, that even sovereign power, even kings, require guidance from their previous generations. You see that when somebody who's in charge doesn't pay attention to what happened before them. We see that all the time now, don't we? And this teaches that our authentic rulership honors its origins while also being innovative. And that is something that we could all learn from, is tradition has its limitations, but so does blind innovation. It is a marriage of harmony and balance between the two that lead to abundance and happiness for humans. And so from this point, one moment, we get the rulership of the 12. I'll be right back. I need to fill this coffee real quick. All right. So, the 12. Zeus now appeals to his father. How do I set up this generation? And Kronos gave him lengthy advice. Thus Zeus divided up the kingdom amongst the greatest of the gods, and he and 11 others, for which they are known as the Dodekatheon, the 12 Olympian gods. And he gave them each governance over the natural laws. So they became Hestia, Ares, Artemis, Hephaestus, Hera, Poseidon, Athena, Aphrodite, Apollon, Hermes, Zeus, and Demeter. Now, why 12? Why 12? Well, 12 is the number of completeness. 12 months, 12 zodiac signs, 12 hours of day, and 12 hours of night. Each deity receives authority over specific laws and domain. I mean, we can kind of see them already. Hestia is the heart, the focal point of everything. She is the fire. Ares as that male warlike principle, but not, excuse me, I don't know why I'm falling asleep on the spot here. Not necessarily always the principle of war, but of expansion, well, and at times retraction. Artemis as that liminal huntress, Hephaestus as the craftsman, Hera as the bonding force between all things. Poseidon is, in many ways, it's interesting that they put him in here. Poseidon, for many of the Neoplatonists later who follow in a lot of the footsteps of the Orphics, is like the Zeus, if Zeus were to make himself into Zeus again. Since Zeus kind of ceases to be as a being the way that these gods are, Poseidon is like Zeus 2.0, if you will. He's characterized as different in Hesiod, and he's characterized as different by Homer, but from the Platonists and many of the theologians talking about this kind of stuff in the classical and the Hellenistic era, Poseidon isn't really this like ocean dude. He is a creator deity in and of himself. Many of his actions like just really reek of the Zeus milieu. So it's like Zeus hiding and playing Zeus again through a different form. Enough about Poseidon. Athena, of course, is that integrated wisdom. She is the wisdom of Zeus embodied. Aphrodite is the generative principle, but also the ordering principle of beauty. Apollo, right hand of Zeus, and the harmonic ordering principle. Hermes is that mediating principle. And then you have Zeus as the top of it, right? So it's like they put him in the 12, but he's above the 12. And then you have Demeter, who is, again, his mother. His mother and sister, by which he births his daughter, who then becomes his wife, who births Zagreus Dionysus. It's very complicated. But what we see here within this 12 is a cosmic governance system, and it is the finality of Zeus's creation before he takes that redemptive arc, before he goes into the next step. He has to create this in order to set the stage, if you will, for the Dionysian play. And so this establishes the order and the necessary conditions for the coming of the mortal and then to be immortal Dionysus. So he's setting up the cosmic admin. This is everybody who's going to be pulling the strings behind the scenes. And everybody has a very specific part, you know. Like Hera, she's going to have the part of essentially instigating the Titans to kill Dionysus. It's an integral part, and it's one that is foreseen, right? It's not like a surprise. The way that the Orphics see it, it kind of feels like, at least to me, Zeus knows what's coming and what has to happen. And so this is why he sets it up the way that he did. It's not like there's an accident here. He has perfect foreknowledge of all these things. And so even some of the things that on the outset seem terrible, like the murder of a child by the Titanic forces out of the rage and jealousy of Hera, seem very terrible from a literal perspective, but are integral in the fact that Dionysus then is afforded the opportunity to be the master of death. And so we get the Dodekatheon. Well, I'm really struggling with that one, where we have the 12. And so that's the fifth order. And that is kind of like, if you compare it to the 6 days of creation, that's it. God rests. And then in a way, because he's still got more work to do, he kind of rests after the whole Dionysian thing. But you can see this is tracking the 6 kings that we see in the Orphic Rhapsodies. Order is being created in a very specific way, a specific form, and it is going to culminate in Zeus and Persephone. Now we have, of course, the numeric symbolism of 12. We talked about that. The functional integration of the 12. They're complementary, they're dynamic, they work together, and they produce a state of equilibrium. Without those 12, you don't have the equilibrium that you have for the essentially, like, let's call creation the womb of the Redeemer, the womb of Dionysus, the womb of us who have to follow the same path as Dionysus. And then there's a hierarchical structure which puts Zeus at the top, right? So he's at the apex of the 12. And it also symbolizes that there is a cosmic intelligence that has various pieces that maintain those functions. But in this case, Zeus is transformed. His divine children represent, in what I'm anticipating and talking about here in these videos, it's far more than just mythic figures. These aren't just myths, they aren't stories. This is a sophisticated understanding of how the universe functions, of how reality functions for the Orphics. They embody these essential functions. They are the architecture of a living and breathing cosmos. This is an enchanted universe. This is not disembodied principles. This is, for them, both a cosmic principle, but at the same time, something you can interact with. It's not mechanical like we tend to see it now in this post-enlightenment understanding of the cosmos. These people saw these as living, breathing matrices of consciousness that could be interacted with, could be experienced, could be spoken to, could be messages could be received from them. So in many ways, the way I break it down within these videos is because that's how our brain now is trained to work. It's trained to find patterns, and we tend to see them, these patterns, as words, right? Well, what is Aphrodite? Well, she's the principle of beauty, so you understand what beauty is. But for them, it was living. It was alive. To see beauty in a flower was to see Aphrodite. To see the morning sun peek across the horizon was to see Apollo. To go on a hunt, to feel the sweat dripping down your body, to claim the life of an animal, to feed your family, was to see and experience Artemis. These are all swirling around us at all times, all of these 12 of the Dodekatheon. They are all with us all the time, and for them it was alive, it was living, it was breathing, and it's truly, as you say in there, it's beautiful. It's much more than this kind of disembodied, super intellectual way that we tend to look at the cosmos now. But what actually happens here is he shows us what we see is how Zeus transforms, and it leads us to some conclusions about how we can transform as well. This is beyond mere polytheism, right? We tend to try to shove everything into boxes now. This is polytheistic because it has multiple gods, and this is that. I don't think they saw it that way. This was a unified consciousness, and it was differentiated through these various progeny, each of these deities representing a functional aspect of the united Zeus, right? One divine power, one divinity, the commander of the world, manifesting itself through different forms. So everything being divine, everything being... And in this case, think of it this way. Zeus isn't even male at that point. It's just undifferentiated divinity pouring itself out in delight, in love for the cosmos through various forms, experiencing itself. Now, this divine generation, this emanation of Zeus, they say, mingled his own limbs with the power and the strength of God. Each birth, then, is revealing specific cosmic functions and principles that are living. They're alive. These narratives, these are like the generational myths of Hesiod and all these things. They're vehicles for us to understand how things play out and how we should interact with those things in the world. There's a lot. These stories communicate these deep truths that are difficult for us to understand from an intellectual perspective. They have to be experienced, which is why I think initiation was such a big deal for so many of the mystery cults, including the Orphics. There's a living cosmos, and you can experience it. But before we get into the next piece, and next week what we're going to do is we're going to talk about Zagreus and his death and rebirth and Dionysus, and then we'll continue to talk about what this means for Dionysus through the eyes of Nonus. And that's where we'll stick for a while, I think, is because we're getting to the end of much of what the Orphic Rhapsodies have to say. There's not that much text. You know, if we were going to put it into a book, it'd be like maybe 50 pages between all the different fragments. So there's not much, and we've covered a lot within that, but we've set the stage. The redemptive arc of Zeus isn't complete. Dionysus has yet to be born, and we will experience that here soon. Before we get to questions, though, I did have a song for you guys today, so I'm going to fire that off now.
Yo, forget the fireside myths, the simple story told. This ain't just a family tree, it's cosmic data bold. Orphic fragments coded deep, a metaphysical design. Zeus ain't just a thunder god, he's the architect divine. Progeny as principles, emanations take their flight. Unified consciousness unfolds from darkness into light. And neck is grip necessity, the first unyielding thread. Fate, Heim, the framework where the future's read. Limitations, paradox for formal structure to exist. But in these chains, a pathway if you can persist. Beyond the veil of narrative, a structure starts to gleam. The blueprint of existence, a soteriological dream. Artifact divine, his children form the frame. Metaphysical structure, whispering his name. From one thought, the cosmos, a symphony unfold. Order born from chaos to rebuild the world. Yeah. Then Demi stands beside him, the regulatory queen. Dyke, that's justice, cosmic balance, sharp and keen. You know me, a good order, hierarchy takes its place. The charrettes emerge now with beauty, joy, and grace. A glare, splendor, shining, Euphrosyne's vibrant spark. Thelia's green, abundance, leaving its eternal mark. Irene brings the peace in, the seasons dance and sway. Temporal unfolding, a necessary cosmic play. Aphrodite rises from the seed and ocean's foam. Material manifestation, finding its true home. Each birth a new dimension, each power takes its hold. A universe constructed more precious than all gold. Architect divine, his children form the frame. Metaphysical structure, whispering his name. From one thought, the cosmos, a symphony unflawed. Order born from chaos to rebuild the world. Yes, yeah, I buy you on a sale. Oscar sadness in the stove, baby. White your rose and lead together the light. Gypsy they gorgeous, stag on the eyes. Fucking ass, yeah, I buy you on a sale. Oscar sadness in the stove, baby. Keep your rose and lead together the light. Watch it in gorgeous, stag in the eyes.
All right, there's our song for the day. I didn't quite get that one the way I wanted it to, so I'll probably rework that one, but it was fun nonetheless. So Healing with Diamonds asks, how do you interpret what Athena did to Medusa? Well, that's one of those things, right? If we are thinking about things, reading them literally, we're in a heap of trouble. But that is one that is really popular with people, I've noticed, the whole Medusa arc. And I'll be honest, I haven't really given it all that much thought. She doesn't really pop into the Orphic corpus all that much, so it's not something that I've considered. But if I'm remembering correctly, there is a sort of a violation by Poseidon of Medusa, and Medusa is supposed to be chaste as a priestess, and because of that she's somehow punished. There's a lot that goes into something like that. Like, what are they trying to mean by saying that she's punished for being violated? Um, but then you see, like, okay, so what is the function of Medusa in the later parts of the tale, right? Medusa becomes this Gorgon, and she's essentially a monster who freezes men, right? With a look. But what happens then later on is that her head is taken by a hero, and then that head is then later used to right some sort of wrong. Now, not it's not exactly like you do in, like, Clash of the Titans, where he Perseus grabs the head and stops the Kraken, but the Greeks were very interested in mankind, heroes, in some cases, in many cases, demigods, right? Partial god, partial humans, righting or correcting or redeeming aspects of the world that are not operating within the cosmic order, right? So, in many cases, these tragedies that we see happen have a larger part to play in a grander cosmic scheme. So without that violation, without Medusa becoming what she becomes through Athena, and that punitive transformation that she goes through, that larger issue is not corrected by the heroic action. So there's a lot of moving parts, and one could say, you look at it and you go, well, that's not fair, and that's not within the cosmic order for that to happen to Medusa, right? And I think that's one of those things that we have lost as modern interpreters of these myths, is we look at it and we say, well, that's not fair, or that's not right, or that's not moral, and we're projecting our modern morality on people many thousands of years ago, and at the same time we don't have the same frame of reference to the writers and what they were intending and what they meant and what that meant in the grander scope of the context of their society. So it's also not fair, right, for us to interpret it as that is a bad by the gods, right? Does that make sense? We have to, yeah, right. We have to zoom out and look at it from a much larger perspective. What was the overall impact of Medusa in that form? What was righted because of her pain? And in many ways, suffering. Like, you don't get some of the greatest revelations of humanity without suffering. Suffering, while it sucks, right? It's no good. It doesn't feel good. It's not wonderful to go through. Builds people of immense character, power, that change and transform the world. Suffering is not something that I think we tend to run from, because we're all very comfortable monkeys now. But in the ancient world, everything was hard for everyone most of the time. And so suffering built, and this is an unpopular view, character. It built character within people, and it formed them into heroic archetypes. And we seem to want to banish that from the world. Suffering is a crucible for creation of people of moral fiber. And I think that's what the heroes were all about. Almost all of the heroes were born out of suffering in some way, shape, or form. Hercules goes through horrible things. Horrible things. Like, his family, he gets tricked into murdering his wife and child, but then becomes the pinnacle of divinity, and then goes and lives alongside the gods of Olympus because of all of that suffering. You see, so it's not a popular take, but I think that's one of the things that we have to do when we're considering, why is this such a barbaric story? There's something much more. There's a lot of depth to it. We got to read it allegorically. Okay, so we have. What else did you guys ask? Dionysus eaten by the Titans. There's another one. If he's not eaten by the Titans, then we don't have a redemptive arc ourselves as humans, right? we're continuing the damnedness that happened to previous iterations of creation. How do we lose the divine feminine? How does your talk today relate back to Dragon Mother Rising? Well, we lost the feminine through relegating the feminine to just a generative principle instead of what it is, and that's a product of monotheistic thinking or bad ways of thinking about unified divinity. Yes, Orpheus himself was an Argonaut. He was on the Argo along with Hercules, right? Along with all these big, sweaty heroes who are killing monsters and everything. You've got this kind of like lanky Orpheus, who his only power really is his music and the ability to not only woo humans and animals, but the gods alike with his divine lyre. So, what else did you have? Did the Orphics have a concept of archons? Was Earth a prison to them or more of a school? Yeah, no, they did not see things, in my estimation. Now, others might disagree with me because the Orphics were very interested in purgation and purity, but they didn't see the world as a prison. I think that was more of a misinterpretation by Middle Platonists about specific lines that Plato has about the body being a tomb. This world, for many people in the classical thinking, if you will, is the underworld. Like this world being embodied is kind of like a death of sorts. There's levels to it, of course, because we die from this world as well. But I think Plato wasn't meaning that being inside of a body was being non-divine. I think that's a misreading of what Plato's talking about there, and I think that many of the Gnostics took some of what Plato said way too literally, and then decided to create this like crazy Gnostic, there are all these celestial archons controlling us and we have to get out of here attitude. The Orphics are not at all like that. They understand that there is a titanic nature, which is one of that needs some sort of redemption. But it's not that it's like fallen or sinful even. It's that it just requires some correction through effort. And so one of the things that they did, and this is what we have most of the information on them, by way of the Orphic gold tablets that we find in ritual settings and in the burials, which are instructions for how to die before death, to understand how to die right when you die. And if that makes sense, they go through katabatic ritual to understand what death means and also understand what to do in death that they may somehow redeem their life. And this harkens back in many ways to how the Egyptians handled it. If you look at the papyri of Ani or the pyramid texts, the way that you handle death in life dictates specifically how you might handle death in death. And so preparing yourself for death while you're alive was vital for the Orphics. And it also provided you an understanding of how to live ethically while you live, rather than living by your base natures or desires. There was control or harnessing of those desires to do good instead. So I don't think that they had any archons or anything like that. There's nothing that says that. As we've kind of gone through with the Orphic Rhapsodies, they were very much portraying a world of redemption and of divine love coming from Zeus, and so not a prison Earth like the Gnostics with their whacked out takes go for. What else we got here? Do you think theurgy can be applied to any pantheon with study and practice? Yes. Theurgy is religion. That's what all of them are. Is a process of understanding and rectifying our illusion that stems in the brain of separation. Our idea of separation, theurgy, takes us to an understanding of unity, of henosis, if you will, and any one of them have methodologies that can be applied, right? Whether it's yoga, whether it's meditation and mantra, whether it's deep theurgic ritual, even the Eucharist and prayer within Christianity. You go to an Orthodox church, that's theurgy in practice today, right? It's pretty close. Going into, touch grass says healing with diamonds. That's perfect right there. You want to do theurgy? Go outside. Go outside, sit down quietly by a stream, shut your mouth, and listen. That's baseline theurgy. Yeah, have fun with a dog. Cryptic Cocktail says, I think that Holy Spirit and Mary for the Catholics and the Shekinah for the Jews is a band-aid for the divine feminine, but it was empire that removed the feminine. I think you're pretty accurate there. They a band-aid, or they veiled it. They veiled it to produce some sort of control over the feminine. But it persists, like you can see it, and that's one of the videos that we've done before. It's a veiling, but you can't ever silence it. Like, you just see in practice how Mary is arguably just as important as Jesus is to many of the people practicing. How many people pray to Mary more daily than they do to the other elements of the Catholic faith? Like, you can veil it, you can try, and you can try to control it, but there's no controlling that feminine principle. That's just foolishness. It tends to bite back when you do. Where does Hestia fit into your talk today? Well, Hestia is the center of all of it. Hestia's got some really interesting myths, and I do have a video on her on the channel. She gets courted by almost all the other Olympians, and she doesn't want to do it. She doesn't want to lose her agency. And Zeus understands her importance. She is the essence of all things. She, in Greek life, was pivotal to everyone, right? So you would honor Hestia in the home. You honor Hestia at the center of the city. Before you offer to any god, you offer to Hestia first. So she is the fire, and through sacrifice and offerings, you usually are burning something or you're offering something at that altar. Fire releases the essence, the spirit of something. So say if you were going to offer incense of X to X deity, you have to first go through Hestia, which is the fire, to burn it. And so a portion of all to Hestia is what they would say. She gets a portion of everything, so she is dead center in all of this. That's why in the 12, she's first. So when the Orphic Rhapsodies list off who are the 12, Hestia's first. So that's where she is, right in the center. So if you're not honoring Hestia first, you're not performing it the way the Greeks would have. Saw a video of Lilith and Mary being the same person. Well, man, the Hebraic current really loves their Lilith stuff, don't they? They just really love talking about Lilith. I tend to not touch that subject because it brings out some of the real wacko ideas. And I think it comes about from this great suppression of the divine feminine. All the Lilith strangeness is repressive behavior, and it's reasonable that has happened when you've repressed a portion of your population as a species for 2,000 some odd years. Any other questions? I got a few more minutes. How was the sound today? We all clear? Mario said it was laggy, but I hope I cleaned up some of the sound issues at the very least. Of course, then I have the issue that it was porting over to the wrong the wrong stream, so I'm glad you guys found me at least through live. Awesome. Yay! Lilith Fair in the 1990s. That's where it came back. Oh, yeah. One of these days I'll have to do the whole presentation instead of in two chunks because the first one the audio got messed up. I'm still kind of seething about that. Um, what's your view on the Percy books? Are those the teen books about the Olympians or whatever, about Percy Jackson or something? Is that what you're talking about? If so, I never read them. Man, those are some names there. That brings me back. Alanis Morissette, Jewel. Yeah, Rick. Yeah, Rick's books. I've never read them. They came out way after I would have probably been in the target audience. And I am horrible at reading fiction now. I used to be a big fiction reader in my youth, like early, teenage years and early 20s. But anymore, if it's not something like philosophy or mythology or theurgy, I can't read it. I'm too hyper fixated and obsessed with this topic. But I do know that those books made Greek mythology much more popular within a generation, and so they brought some of this stuff at least more into popular culture, where it has kind of been like relegated to superstition. I can remember growing up and it's like you cover a little bit of mythology and they're like, these are some really fun stories from Greece. Not even like just I mean, I went to Baptist school, so I don't even think we covered it at all. I had to wait till getting into public school to really experience anything from Greek mythology, and it was just kind of like glossed over. So I think when you have something like that in pop culture come out, it really does a lot for populations of people coming out now, like who are operating in this Hellenismos, if you will. And also in some ways provides a lot of misinformation, but that's part of it, man. Part of practice is making a bunch of mistakes first and then finding your way. Yeah, good fiction is good philosophy, can be, and he did popularize it greatly. Any more questions? I do hope next week I'll be able to do 2 live streams. Tomorrow night, I will be live streaming with Samuel David, who is the author of Rod and Ring, and also a couple other books on Sumerian, Mesopotamian mythos and practice. So I'm going to be chatting with him tomorrow night. We're going to go live and we're going to talk about Inanna, Sumerian stuff. I'm not entirely sure what we're going to talk about yet, but it's going to be fun. Well, Hermes is Toth if you ask the Greeks. The Greeks say that he is. The Egyptians may not see it that way. But, I mean, most of antiquity was pretty comfortable with saying, oh yeah, you've got that guy over there, we call him this, with very little rebuttal on form and function like we do now, where it's like, well, it can't be the same guy, he doesn't do the same thing. It's definitely something that they would have said, okay, yeah, he operates in the same way. Toth operates as the mediating principle between Ra and the lower orders of deities. So very much like Zeus and Hermes. So one would say a lot of what the Greeks have by the time you get into the Hellenistic era is Egyptian anyways. So much of it is. Like you have the native elements, like Hera seems to be a very native Greek deity. Dionysus is foreign feeling. Like I don't think he's necessarily originally Greek. I think that's an Osirian mixed through the lens of the Near East. So Dionysus comes in and kind of takes over, but most of what you have by the Greeks isn't really Greek. They were very much taking ideas from different areas. Like Aphrodite, not Greek. That is a Near Eastern goddess that was mixed in. So you got Aphrodite from Cyprus, which isn't really what we call mainland Greece. So these elements like Hermes, Zeus, Zeus Amun, um, these are all kind of a mixture of ideas, and so much of the greatest thinkers of the Greeks were all trained in Egypt and the Near East. Pythagoras, Plato, Orpheus is said to have gone down there, Musaeus as well. So all of the greatest thinkers and creators and theologians of Greece all were trained in Egypt. So the Greeks definitely say we call him Hermes, but the Egyptians, they may not see it that way, even though they seem in form and function to operate the same way. Well, right on, guys. Thanks for coming and tuning in today. Again, I'll hope to get 2 out next week. We're getting into some interesting territory with Dionysus. And I'm not sure what else we'll do, but I hope I can get out 2 next week. I also have a video coming out on Ereshkigal, which I need to put some time away to finish. It'll be kind of like all the other fun AI videos, but it is kind of wrapping up the Inanna video series. So that's coming out, and thanks so much, guys. I will talk to you soon.